It was fall freshman year of college for me. And I distinctly remember this. I was on my own for the first time, right? 18, common thing for 18-year-olds who go off to school. Moved out, was living in the dorms. And so I don't know, probably a month or two after the start of the fall semester, I come home for the first time. And of course, I come home, eat for free, and then do laundry for free, which is a big deal when you move out. Except for this trip, I came home with a little extra angst built up within me after a month or two off of college. And I came home, never forget this, I go to the dining room, got the table there, open up my backpack, and I take a book like this out. If you can't see it, it's a biology textbook. And I take this thing out, and I just kind of slam it on the table. Because for the first time in my life, 18 years, grew up in the church, for a couple weeks, I had been exposed to something called evolutionary theory within biology. And for someone who grew up in the church, it seemed like I was hitting this point as an 18-year-old where I had a decision to make. Do I go with this and what my college professor is saying, or do I go with this? My whole life I'd gone with this, but I had never really been exposed to this. And I was having a crisis of faith. And so I put it down. My mom said, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember asking my mom and dad, I'm like, you guys got to give me answers for this. Because this seems like these are at opposite ends of the spectrum. And I was in a crisis mode. Like I was having an existential crisis. I'm young, 18, kind of hot-headed, dogmatic. And I'm just like, I got to figure this out. Like I'm not okay living in this tension. I want to figure out what is true. Is that what the biology textbook is saying, is that we're just here all unguided molecules? Man, that doesn't seem like Genesis 1. But all I've ever known is Genesis 1. Anybody here been in that conflict between faith and science? At least I was. And that semester actually started a very significant life forming and shaping journey for me, honestly, in some ways that I'm still on, and that what it forced me to do, because I wasn't okay not getting answers. And the common answer you get in church is like, oh, well, you just got to trust this. Just put your faith in this. This is the Bible. It's true. Science, that's the devil. They don't know what they're talking about. I wasn't okay with that. And to be honest with you, I don't think we should be okay with that. I think questions and doubt, not only are they healthy, I actually think they're biblical. How's that? In the Psalms, doubt is expressed. So this led me on a huge journey, which honestly ended up me going to seminary, becoming a pastor, all this other stuff I don't have time to get into. But what it taught me will forever change the way you read the Bible and interpret the Bible, which is so foundational to being a Christian. And it's this: you have to read the Bible in its original ancient context. I'd be willing to say, I think 90% of probably our intellectual problems or skepticism that people have in the Christian faith, most of them, not all of them, but most of them have to do with us not reading this the way that it was meant to be read. And what I mean by that is that we take our particular questions as now 2025 modern day Americans, and we take our questions and we put that onto the text of the Bible and we read it in a way that it was never meant to be read, meaning 3,000 years ago in the ancient Near East, when Genesis was either orally or written and passed down, they weren't asking the same questions that we asked. They didn't approach the text with the worldview that we now do as a society dominated by science and technology. In a lot of ways, that is what this series is going to be about. So this morning, 2025, we start a brand new series called Origins. And as I always sarcastically say, we're not that clever here. The word Genesis in Greek means origin, go figure. So Genesis is really the book of beginnings. So new year, let's start it off, and let's go start with the Bible, how it starts it off. Genesis, the book of origins. And so for the next couple months, we're just gonna be in this book, and here's the crazy thing. We're not even gonna get through the whole book. Genesis is like 50 chapters, big book. We're literally just gonna sit in like the first 12 chapters. Because in particular, Genesis 1 through 11, 1 through 12 is really all about origins. How things started within an ancient Jewish worldview. And so what I need you to grasp this morning as we propel ourselves in for the next couple months is that we have to read the book of Genesis as it was originally made to be read. So if you were an ancient Near Eastern person living in Babylon, in Assyria, Egypt, Canaan, what are they asking? What are they thinking? How are they seeing the world? Not as we Americans do today. Of course, I mean, we're very, Americans are very arrogant people. We think our way is the best way and the only way. And the unhealthy thing is we actually read the Bible that way too. But ancient people were not stupid. They were actually very, very, very smart, sometimes smarter than us. And so you need to grab a hold upon this truth. God spoke to a particular people at a particular time, in a particular place, with a particular language. That is so important to grasp. In other words, we'll put this up on the screen, and this might rattle some of us. The Bible was not written to you, but it was written for you. It's a very important nuance. The Bible is not written to you. The Bible was written to ancient Israelites 3,000 years ago, at least the Old Testament. But it is written for you. So God communicated with a specific purpose to a specific people at a specific time in a specific place, and not in English, oh, by the way. They did not have technology. They did not have astronauts. They did not have scientific biology textbooks, all this kind of stuff. Let me go a little bit deeper with this. We'll put a chart up. I mean, lots of charts in this series. If you don't like them, I'm sorry. Let me introduce to you, and now in more detail, how ancients thought versus how we think today. In the ancient world, they were most concerned with asking questions of why or who. This is in contrast to us today. We like to ask questions of how or when. How and when are scientific questions, meaning how did this happen? How did we get here? When did this happen? Okay, that is very different than why did this happen and who did it. Another way of putting this is that we modern people, we're all about science, and in particular physics. Physics is about how things physically happen. In the ancient world, they were more concerned about what philosophers call metaphysics. Metaphysics is another way of saying, why are we here? Again, it's the difference between asking why versus how. A third way of putting this is that the ancients were most concerned about purpose, as we today are more concerned about process. Science deals with process, how we got here, when we got here. The ancient Near East was concerned about why we're here. Do you guys see the difference here? This is very, very, very important. Like it may not seem like it, but I'm just gonna tell you right now, if you don't grasp this, honestly, Genesis 1, you're just gonna miss it. And here's how this applies to Genesis 1. So now let's get to the details. So many people that I talk to today, and my own freshman 18-year-old self, I was wrestling with these questions. When did God create the world? How old is the earth? Is the earth 10,000 years old? Or is it 3.5 billion years old like science tells us? Because I was taught that the earth is young. We're supposed to take day literally in Genesis 1 as 7 literal 24-hour days. And so this earth, well, it's 10,000 years old, but hold on. This is telling me that this earth is 3.5 billion years old, and then the Milky Way galaxy is 13.5 billion years old. There's a conflict there. But I'm asking how? How old? When was this world created? And then you do the same thing with Adam and Eve. When were Adam and Eve created? How were they created? I mean, doesn't the text say that the Spirit of God like blew into his nostrils and then female came out of a rib, out of a side? You're telling me that that's how females are created? Dude, that's like myth. But I'm asking how and when questions. Do you see that? Science, that is the job of science, to ask how. And as it should be. Let it be clear in the series. I actually think Christians should be the most pro-science people. Did you know that Christians were actually the original scientific founders? So people like Newton, Copernicus, Galileo. Well, here's what's fascinating. People don't know this. I'd say it's 9 a.m. Man, it was the church who branded them as heretics. And you know what's fascinating is Copernicus, so it's called the Copernicus Revolution, because he said, hey, the earth is going around the sun. Up to that time period, humankind thought that the sun revolved around the earth. And so he says, no, we're wrong. The earth is revolving around the sun. And the church said, no, that's not what this says. And they called him a heretic and they put him on trial. Now, history says that the church was wrong. We all now know that we revolve around the sun. So was the Bible wrong? No, the way they were reading it and interpreting it was wrong. But it didn't seem like that at the time for them. So they branded them as heretics. In a lot of ways, that's what we need to do in this day and age with how we read Genesis 1, 2, and 3. And so I need you to put yourself into the perspective of an ancient Near Eastern person and them asking the why question, the purpose question, the meaning question, not necessarily the how question or the when question. Because that is a very modern way of thinking. And neither one is right or wrong. It's just a different way of approaching reality. So to kind of warm up your brains a little bit here, because I'm very aware pastorally, like this is a huge paradigm shift for a lot of us. I'm assuming that some of you come in with a particular interpretation of Genesis 1 that, just to be blunt, might be a little rattled this morning and for the next couple months. So here's what I need to warm you up cognitively. I want to share a story with you that was the most common, the most popular creation narrative in the ancient Near East 3,000 years ago. It's a story that comes out of Babylon. We'll put it up on the screen. It's called Enuma Elish. And honestly, you can just Google this and learn about it. So Enuma Elish was the most common creation narrative floating around the ancient Near East, okay? This was the dominant paradigm, and I'm gonna explain it, so just hold on. But you gotta know that if you were an Israelite, this story was what most people were talking about. Genesis 1 for an Israelite, Enuma Elish was for every other culture, Babylon, Egypt, Sumeria, so on. So an Israelite said, hey, the origins of the world, we know about that in Genesis 1. All other cultures and civilizations said, no, Enuma Elish is the dominant narrative of origins, okay? So now what is the story? Now this is gonna sound pretty crazy to you because we just don't think this way, but this is the dominant paradigm. And the story is this. There's two gods who get in a fight. The dude on the right, his name is Marduk. Don't name your son Marduk. Actually, don't name your daughter Tiamat either. She's the one on the left. Here's what Marduk and Tiamat do. They get in a huge war, they get in a huge fight, and oh, by the way, actually Tiamat, the one on the left, is actually Marduk's great-grandma. This is Family Feud right here, all right? All the fights happen within the family. And Tiamat, great grandma over here on the left, doesn't she look lovely, by the way? I mean, wow. Man, you all need some coffee this morning or something. Okay. All right. Tiamat. Tiamat is the goddess of the sea, the goddess of the ocean. She was the chaos goddess. Why? In the ancient world, and if you were here for the Revelation series, we talked about this. In the ancient world, the sea, the ocean, stood for chaos. And just think about it. If you're out in the middle of the ocean, no technology, that's a very scary place. Right? Shipwrecks, all this kind of stuff. So Tiamat is the goddess of the sea. She's known as the chaos god. You just got to remember that. Well, Marduk doesn't like her, so he kills her. He kills his great grandma. What a nice grandson. All right? It gets worse and gets a little graphic. Marduk takes great grandma Tiamat and slices her in half. He fillets her. Check this out. And he creates the world out of her body. So Tiamat, sliced in half, Marduk then takes both halves of her body, and that is how he creates the world according to Babylon and their dominant creation myth, Enuma Elish. He separates the waters out of her carcass. Pretty cool, right? No, it's not cool. It's weird. But anyways, guys, the last 4 weeks, all I've been doing is like reading ancient Near East myths. It's freaking crazy. I need a break from it. But anyways, I won't even tell you the dreams I've been having. Back on track. So he creates the world out of the result of a violent conflict. Then check this out. Marduk and all his boys, they're tired of running the world. It's pretty laborious. You know, you gotta do vegetation, agriculture. So they decide to create these things called humans, because they want the humans to do all the hard work because they're tired. So humans in the ancient world, according to this Babylonian creation narrative, humans are basically like slaves. We'll let them do all the hard work so that the pagan gods can kind of sit back on the couch, put their feet up. And so humans were made to feed the gods. When they made sacrifices at the temples, that food there was there to feed the god. The temple was a house for the god. By the way, we're gonna talk about temples the next couple weeks. It's gonna be interesting. So here's what I wanna do. Let's go to the next slide. Here's what you gotta know. I'm not gonna bore you guys and share all the Egyptian, mythology and Assyrian mythology. I'm just gonna sum it up for you, okay? You can go Google this stuff, all that out. But here's the point. And you gotta know this, because this is the dominant motif, the worldview of which Genesis 1 comes out of. Ancient creation stories had these three things in common. Here they are. First one, the world was birthed in a great conflict between the gods. Every single creation story out of Babylon, Egypt, Sumeria, which were the main three back then, creation always started with a slugfest between the gods. Number two, creation was about bringing order out of chaos. Let me unpack this one because it's foreign to us. In the ancient world, as I said, the sea, the ocean, darkness, all those things stood for chaos. Another way of putting this is that it was land that was inhabitable. It wasn't made for humans. There was no structure. It was just darkness and ocean and sea. It was chaotic. All their creation stories start with chaos. And then it's the job of the gods to bring order to it. Remember that. Number three, humans were always made as an afterthought to serve the pagan gods. So next week, we're gonna look at the image of God. We're gonna see a direct contrast there. But just know that in the ancient creation narratives, humans were there to serve the gods and do the work for them because they were tired and lazy. Now, with that in mind, and by the way, you don't need to go to seminary because I just told you everything that they'll teach you there, all right? It's free. Now, with that in mind, let's go to the Bible, Genesis chapter 1. It's a cool thing to say, turn to page 1, because that's what we're doing this morning. Page 1, orange Bibles under the chairs if you need one. Page 1, the book of Genesis. I tell you, Genesis in Greek means beginning. So it's the book of beginnings, the book of origins. Here we go. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, listen to this. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. We're gonna stop right there. I spares you guys. My nerdy self, I wanted to just preach the next 3 months just on these 2 verses. And I'm not joking with you, I could do it. Each word is so important right here. So let me just break down a couple of the big ones. The first one, the word beginning in Hebrew, in the beginning, that is the Hebrew word reshit. Now I realized after the 9 a.m. I should have put the spelling up there because it's spelled R-E-S-H-I-T, reshit. This is the Hebrew, folks. Don't get mad at me, talk to God. Here's why this word is so important. Reshit means a lengthy period of time, not a particular moment. So there's different ways of talking about a starting point, a beginning. We hear this phrase in the beginning and we think of a specific moment, like boom, that moment, it happened. No. That is not what reshit means. And I don't got time to show you the other examples of how it's used in the Hebrew Old Testament. But reshit means an indeterminate length of time, a block of time, a period of time. It's long, and it's also ambiguous. It could be 10 days, could be 10,000 years, could be 4 billion years. We don't know. The point of reshit is that it's a long period of time and not at a specific moment. That is how Genesis 1 starts, in the reshit, in this long, ambiguous time. Maybe kind of like saying, if you're a Star Wars fan, how does Star Wars begin? A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Honestly, in some ways, that's kind of how Genesis 1:1 starts. A long time ago, here's how things unfolded. Now, notice, we haven't even gotten to day 1 yet. We're not even at day 1 yet. And you got verse 2. For years, verse 2 troubled me. And then I started doing a lot of research and I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes complete sense. So let me read verse 2 for us. Now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. There's a very odd phrase there, like it's very abstract, formless and empty. What does it mean when something's formless and empty? Like it's very abstract. All right, more Hebrew, here we go. This phrase in Hebrew is called tohu vavohu. It's just fun to say, tohu vavohu. To spare you time, in English, here's a good, I think, translation of tohu vavohu. This comes from an Old Testament scholar named John Selhammer, who's written a great book called Genesis Unbound. What this phrase is getting at is an uninhabitable land. Another scholar I've read on this says another good translation would be barren wilderness, okay? So it's not nothing. It's not nothing, it's something. It's just something that's inhospitable. It's without order, it's chaotic, an inhabitable land, a barren wilderness. That is what tohu vavohu means. Keep that in mind. And now then we read this next thing that says, the Spirit of God is hovering. Now, that is a Hebrew phrase. The picture there is actually of a female eagle circling and hovering over her nest of eggs, meaning protecting it, watching over it. And so in verse 2, here's the scene we get. This uninhabitable land, this barren wilderness, the Spirit of God is kind of circling over it, and there's sea everywhere, which stands for chaos. Darkness means chaos. There's chaos, there's darkness, there's sea, and the Spirit of God is hovering over it. We think, I'm going to rattle some paradigms here, but that's okay. We often think that Genesis 1 is describing for us God creating out of nothing. It's not. Now, before you freak out, I told 9 a.m. this, don't email me. Let me be very clear. Do I believe, does the bridge believe, and does the Bible put forth that God created out of nothing? Yes. Okay? I just don't think that that's taught or is the focal point of Genesis 1. But that is clear as day in John 1:1, Colossians 1:16, and elsewhere in the Bible. So, do we believe that God created out of nothing? Yes. Black and white, let it be known, okay? But I don't think that that is what's being described in Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. Because the picture that emerges, according to the text, not with how we read it, but what does the text say? It is this image that there's barren, messy, chaotic earth, ocean, darkness there. There's something there. It's not that there's nothing there. No, there's something there. It's just chaotic. Do you guys get what I'm saying? This is the scene being painted for us. Remember, we moderns ask, how did God create the world? What was the process? They are not interested in that. They are far more interested in the ancient world of asking, why was the world created and who did it? Now, we're getting to the meat of it. So hang with me here. The author tells us, okay, long time ago, the creator God created everything, the heavens and the earth, that means everything. And then there's chaos, there's darkness, there's water there. Things are a mess. The cosmos is inhabitable. It's not ready for human beings yet. But there's this creative, powerful, artisan God who's ready to get his hands and his feet messy. And now notice what he does. And here we get to it. Verse 3, day 1. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. Notice that, by the way, God doesn't create the darkness. It's already there. Just kind of an interesting thing to point out. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. Verse 6, and God said, let there be a vault. What? Between the waters to separate water from water. We'll come back to that. So God made the vault, and he separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. And God called the vault sky. And there was evening, and there was morning the second day. Now, what is this vault thing? If we were to go outside, I haven't been outside a couple hours. If it's clear today and you look up, what do you see? And not a trick question. Yeah, but what does the sky look like? You call it the sky, but what does it look like? Blue. Someone over there, blue. You see blue, okay. Remember, the ancient world, they don't have Hubble telescope, they don't have astronauts. They're just, what do they see? So they look up and they see blue, and it looks like a dome, right? Like a snow globe. So from their perception, you look up and you see this blue dome, this blue vault. That's what the word in Hebrew means. It could be, you could translate it as dome. Now, let's go deeper. If it's blue, what do you think they may think then? Yes, water. So if they look up and it's a dome, it's a vault, it's blue, from their perception, it totally makes rational sense to think there's water above this dome. That is what's being described here. And they also thought water was underneath the ground, because when you have springs, when you have geysers, what comes up out of the ground? Water. So for them, their cosmology, their cosmos, the universe is actually a lot of water up and water below. And so, of course, another proof of this would be rain. What happens when it rains? Water comes down. That's why they thought water was above. So, here's the point. Here's why this is cool. This is nerdy, this is cool. The point of this is that God is bringing order to the cosmos. And the point of the sky, this vault, this dome, is to provide separation from the waters above and the waters beneath so that it's habitable for humans. He's bringing order to chaos. Okay, now we're just getting going. Verse 9, day 3. And God said, and now this will make more sense. Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, that would be the ocean, and let dry ground appear. And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So what he did here in day 3 is he separated the waters, not only from the waters above and beneath, but now on the surface. Oceans over here, dry land right here. Again, why? So that it's habitable for humans. He needs to bring order and structure to it. Halftime, let me stop right now, pause. I've always been hesitant to preach on Genesis. Genesis is my favorite book of the Bible. I tell you guys the book of Mark, but I'm lying to you. It's Genesis. Genesis is my favorite book in the Bible. And I've always been hesitant to do it because there's so much there, there's so much nuance there that I feel like I would develop more questions than answers, and I'm gonna run the risk of people misunderstanding me and blah, 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 blah. Well, I just said, who cares? We're going for it. A couple things that I need you to do. One, everything that comes out of my mouth, fact check it and go do your own work. I am not the master. I am not God. This is. My job, if I'm doing my job right, if I get you more into this, I'm doing it right. So I want to encourage you to get into the text yourself. Just because I say it, don't just, oh, well, Pastor Mark said it. No. So a couple things. We have a resource table back there with books, but here's the problem. A lot of them sold out from the 9 a.m., so I'm sorry. We'll restock them. Next Sunday, they'll be back. There's one in particular, and it's the one that sold out, that I would highly encourage you to read if you want to go deeper. It's written by an Old Testament scholar named John Walton. He teaches at Wheaton outside of Chicago. He's a Bible-believing Christian, high view of the scriptures. And he's got a book called The Lost World of Genesis 1. And then he's got a second book that's still back there on the Lost World of Adam and Eve, which is Genesis 2 and 3. Man, it is absolutely fantastic. He's way smarter than me, and he'll make way more sense than me. Go read him, okay? He's a trusted scholar. There's other books out there. So go do your research on your own. Now, in this day and age, you can't read everyone because make sure that people are reputable. Oh my gosh, the people think, well, Mark, I read one person said this. Well, yeah, that's some dude sitting on his computer at 1 a.m. typing stuff out that doesn't know what he's talking about. Those are reputable people back there, all right? It's like when you don't go to the doctor, but you diagnose yourself through Google. Whoo! Don't do it. Same thing with theology. Okay, that was me in my 20s with medical diagnosis stuff, and it caused a lot of anxiety. Second thing is give me time. You're gonna leave today with more questions than answers. And on the one hand, that's actually my point. Jesus asked way more questions than he gave answers. But give me time, okay? I'm not gonna answer all your questions today. It's actually gonna take a couple months. And we're just gonna be sitting in Genesis 1 and 2 for a while because there's so much there. So give me time, give me grace. Before you email me, just talk to me in person. With that said, halftime's over. Let's go to the third quarter. Next chart. Okay, this is a beautiful thing right here. Very, very, very beautiful. This right here is a summary of Genesis 1. I don't have the time to go through every single day, and so I'm gonna summarize it for you, but I think this is gonna actually make the real point. Let's go through this. The original problem in Genesis 1, starting at verse 2, is this. Creation is formless and empty. That's the tohu vavohu. That is the inhabitable land, barren wilderness. Creation is messy. Darkness, water everywhere, all right? Okay, here we go. Oh. If you're here and you're not a Christian, at minimum, you got to acknowledge that this is brilliant literature. Oh, So artistic. Why? Because days 1 through 3 are perfectly parallel to days 4 through 6. This is the point of Genesis 1. Check this out. Days 1 through 3, left column, are all about forming. Now remember the problem. Everything's formless and empty. Days 1 through 3 are forming. Okay, day 1, God brings light and darkness. Day 2, he creates sky and sea. Day 3, land and vegetation. Oh, check this out. I've never been more excited for a chart than this. What he forms in days 1 through 3, he fills in days 4 through 6. Perfect match. Day 4, sun and moon and stars. They fill the light and darkness of day 1. Day 5, the birds and the fish fill the sky and the seas. Day 6, the land animals and humans fill the land and the vegetation. Do you see this? Days 1 through 3 parallel days 1 through 6. Now, of course, the answer, the result, day 7, creation is finished, God rests. We're going to preach on that, but we're not going there yet. Now, let me ask you the $1 million question. Do you think this literary structure is an accident? No. Here's the point of Genesis 1. The structure of Genesis 1 matches the point of Genesis 1. The structure of Genesis 1 matches the point of Genesis 1, which is this. God creates the world to bring order out of chaos. He's like this artistic poet, this literary genius who has this blank canvas before him. And now he's going to take all the raw materials and he's going to make a beautiful painting out of it. But you and I are so concerned about, well, how old is that painting? Where did you get the paintbrush from? You're standing in front of like a Van Gogh painting, admire it. But that's what we do with this. I didn't do that at the 9 a.m. I don't know what got into me. Now, I think this is helpful. Let me point out to you what happens when you read Genesis 1 like you would read this. Because you read this very I don't want to say factual or literally, because I actually would say this reading of Genesis is factual and literally, but that's a whole other conversation. Okay, here's the point. Let me ask you these two questions. The text tells us that light's created on day 1. But the sun's not created until day 4. So how is there light on day 1 if the sun's not created till day 4? You guys are just too spiritual. That's why you're saying that. You're way better. You're more spiritual than me. Now, do you think the author of Genesis is just an idiot and is unaware of what he's writing? I don't think so. I think we're reading the text wrong when we ask those questions. Here's another one for you. How can there be morning and evening on day 1 if there, again, isn't a sun until day 4? Thank you, Louis. Good student. I could point out many of those questions with you. So if we read Genesis 1 like a biology textbook, honestly, there's a bunch of stuff to point out that doesn't make sense. That actually is a clue that we're not reading it right. We're reading it with scientific how and process questions. Genesis 1 has got way bigger stuff going on. It's asking the why question. It's asking the purpose question. It's asking why and who. Those are questions of ultimate meaning and purpose. The form or the structure of the passage matches the point of the passage. Maybe you've heard the phrase that like the method is the message. That's what's going on here. Now let me help you out and then quote some scholars here so you don't think I'm cuckoo. Well, I am cuckoo, but Old Testament scholar Peter Enns, this is a great book title. He titled his book, Genesis for Normal People. Here's what he writes. So how does God tame the chaos? First, Where there is no form, the tohu, God will make habitable, ordered space. And where there's emptiness, the bohu, God will fill it. On days 1 through 3, God creates space, and days 4 through 6, God fills the space. The whole chapter is structured as an answer to the formless void problem that we saw in verses 1 through 2. When we see the opening scene of Genesis in this way, we find that the 6 days of creation make a bit of sense. Thank you, God. They aren't about how God created the universe out of nothing or an allegory for evolution. Instead, these days display for us the creative act of Israel's God ordering the chaos. Now, I'm very aware that for most people, what I just read there was like, what in the world? Okay. Peter ends, he gives this brilliant metaphor, which I found so helpful. This one will help us. So he says this, imagine it's game night at your house and your family wants to play Monopoly. Any Monopoly people out here? Okay, Park Place, let's go. Here's the problem though. The kitchen table is stacked with junk mail, backpacks, old snacks, grocery lists, and then some sticky stuff left over from breakfast. Don't you hate that when you get to a table at a restaurant and it's sticky? You can't play the game until you make room for the board. The sacks of money, a place for everyone to sit. So you start to get to work. You systematically clear off the mess on the table so that you can get ready to play. You're not playing yet. You've just created the space. And after you've done all this preparation, now you are ready to put things in their place. Board goes here, money goes there, pieces go here, and some, room for snacks and drinks here. And then everyone takes their proper place sitting around the table so that you can begin playing. This is similar to what is happening in Genesis 1. God puts things in order, days 1 through 3, before setting up the game and playing in days 4 through 6. We begin Genesis with a cluttered kitchen table, a dark, churning ocean, and nothing else, the deep. And we ask ourselves, how in the world is God going to create the beauty that we see in the world today out of this mess? This is what Genesis 1 is asking. Now let me give you one more quote. It's from a pastor and author named Dan Kimball. A great book, not back there, but it's called How Not to Read the Bible, which is very helpful. He puts this. Notice that God's focus is to communicate that he has purpose and design and is the creator of all that exists. He created and formed and filled, not the Egyptian gods and not the sun or the moon. And the symmetry of forming and filling communicates something profound and powerful. Our technical questions and attempts to dissect the text seem irrelevant and exercise in missing the point. God is communicating his awesome power and beautiful purpose for everything through the poetic movement and symmetry of the story. We can use all our time asking the Bible our scientific questions about creation, all the while missing the beauty of what God was communicating to the original recipients. Okay, are we ready? Genesis 1 is ancient trash talking. No, seriously. Now let's bring this all together. Enuma Elish, Babylon, creation myth. Genesis 1 is saying, man, all you gods, Marduk, Tiamat, Re, who's the Pharaoh and king of Egypt, you guys ain't nothing, baby. It's about Yahweh, the creator of the universe. He doesn't need all you other gods to create. I'm going to create it myself. Oh, I'm ready to preach. 11 is way better. He's trash talking out in the court, the cosmos, and he's saying, I alone am the creator. Not the other pagan gods. It gets better. He says, The world is not a mistake. It's not a result of a conflict between the gods, some stupid family feud. No, I've created the world on purpose, with intention and beauty and majesty. It's not a result of a family feud. And oh, by the way, we're gonna learn this next week. Them humans, they're not slaves. Oh, I'm making the world for them so that it can be inhabited and they enjoy it just like we enjoy a Van Gogh painting. This is what's going on in Genesis 1. It's ancient trash talking. NBA players got nothing on trash talk. We got Genesis 1. Now, let me give you something else. It'd be like if you got two people and they're standing before the Grand Canyon and they're looking out at it. And then they get into a stupid argument over how old they think the Grand Canyon is. Well, I think it's 8,000 years old. I think God made it so that it just looks old. The other person's, I'll stop there. Because that's what some people do with Genesis 1. Now I'm just gonna say it, don't read Genesis 1 that way. The other person then says, no, I think it's 13 billion years old. We got radioactive dating now. Look at this sediment layer of rock. We can test that, and here it shows us it's 13 billion years old. Then this person says, well, no, you can't trust that dating. And they get into this huge argument. They have missed the point of standing in front of the Grand Canyon. Standing in front of the Grand Canyon is you look at the beauty, the majesty, the bigness of it, and you say, whoa, this is amazing. That's the point of Genesis 1. But we've turned it into this, and then we just quibble about it when that's not the point of it. Those are the stupid how process questions. God's way more into why. No pun intended, why? Because why? It gets into purpose and meaning. This needs to be said in week 1 of the series. There is no conflict between these. There's not. Now, I'll be very transparent with you guys. I'll play my cards. Do I think our galaxy is 13.5 billion years old? Yes. Do I think the Earth is 3.5 billion years old? Yes. So you can tell how I interpret Genesis 1 now, which I think you could probably already tell that. But actually, the larger point I want to make, science is always changing. So inherent to science, the way science works is that it is continually hypothesizing and testing and experimenting. Science is built off of research. So maybe 50 years from now, we learned that the Earth is 4,000 years old and the galaxy is 20,000 years old. Does that change my faith? Nope. Because I don't think this asks the how question. And here's another way of putting it. Science can tell us, it can examine a canvas and say what it's made out of and when it was painted. But science cannot answer why are humans naturally attracted to beautiful art. Those are two different things. Do you see the difference here between how and why? Genesis 1 is focused on why. You have to read it in its ancient Near Eastern worldview where they're giving stories of how the gods created the world. And the whole point of that was Marduk's way of saying, I'm the most powerful God. I defeated Tiamat. I slayed her in half. I created the world out of her, and I created humans to serve me. He's doing that so that his power reigns. Genesis 1 says, man, get out of here, Marduk. Yahweh's in charge. That's the point of it. So there is no conflict here. And now let me end with really why this matters. The dominant secular worldview right now in the Western world, America and Europe and Australia, is that there is no inherent meaning and purpose. You are just a bunch of unguided molecules put together without design. And sure, We can give you your DNA, we can do genetic tests, we can tell you how old you are, where your family of origin. I mean, they got all that fancy DNA stuff that they like find criminals now through the DNA testing thing, right? They link people. We know so much about how old we are, where we've come from. They can even do the thing there where they can like pre-screen you and show you what diseases you are probable to or inclined to, and so you can correct those now. I mean, if you know what I'm talking about, all that kind of stuff, great. But you know what none of that stuff can do? Is tell you your meaning and purpose and why you're here. Now, because science doesn't answer the why question, it answers the how question, here's what our worldview and our culture has done. We cannot help but look for meaning and purpose. We are meaning-driven people. And so now our culture says, well, science doesn't give us the meaning and purpose, so you know what you need to do? Just create your own meaning. Create your own purpose. Oh, look inside of yourself. Whatever makes you feel good. Yeah, you be you. Just be a little snowflake. I can't stand the stuff that people say. Now, I get what they're saying, it's just slang. Here's what Genesis 1 does. There is an eternal, permanent reality, God, who created you with meaning and purpose and design, and he created you to be here and to flourish. You don't need to look within yourself to find meaning and purpose, which, by the way, if you do that, it's not real meaning and purpose because you're just making it up to feel good. No, there is objective meaning and purpose and design to this place. And you are here on purpose, and your meaning and purpose is found in him. Here's the better news. Creation didn't stop 3,000 years ago, or whenever it was. I think it was way before 3,000 years ago, but anyways. I want to ask you these questions. Where is there chaos in your life today? Put otherwise, you know what God loves to do? God loves to bring light to darkness. He loves to fill the empty void in your life with his presence. And he loves to bring life out of the seas of chaos. Do you know this creator God? Not like a biology textbook, but like when you go to a museum and you stare at a picture and you're in awe of it. This God has created me? And you fall in love with him.